Hey everybody, hope you're having a fantastic week. This Sunday will be an extra special Sunday because it's the 125th anniversary of Taylor's Valley. So our kids choir will show up at 8:50 for rehearsal, and they will be in the auditorium. We'll rehearse as soon as they're done. So just a few minutes after 9, we will go ahead and head down to the kids zone, and then we'll go ahead and just do one worship song. And then I'm going to go ahead and dismiss them into your classes. We're going to try to get them as close to between 9:15 and 9:20 as we can, because it's a shortened lesson, because we're finished with life groups at 9:45, so that we can go ahead and begin our special service at 10. So you'll only have about 25 minutes with them, 20 to 25 minutes with them. So our story this week is the story of Jonah. And this is probably a story that they've already heard before. You know, God tells Jonah to do something. Jonah doesn't want to do it. He goes the other direction. So they, so they put him in this game to try to figure out whose fault this major storm is while he's on the ship. It shows up, it's Jonah. The other sailors and passengers throw him into the water. God sends a big fish to swallow him up, and he spends 3 days in the belly of the whale. The whale vomits him on the shore, and he heads off to Nineveh. And so a lot of times they've probably heard this story and talked about it as a great way of God's deliverance, which is true. But this week when we look at the story, we're really going to look at Jonah's reaction and how Jonah responds to this. Because remember, Jonah didn't want to go because he was very prejudiced against the Ninevites. He did not like them. He thought they earned every bit of God's wrath. And so he did not want to go because he knew that God would give them grace. Think about that for a second. He didn't want to go because he knew God would be gracious to them. So in his mind, he can justify his prejudice because he thinks they deserve God's wrath and not his grace. And there are a lot of times that we do that. How many times do we not go and offer forgiveness to someone because we think they deserve us holding a grudge? Or how often do we withhold expressing hospitality to people because we think they've earned the position that they're in? Or we withhold help because, well, they deserve that because of their life choices. That's the attitude that Jonah's being confronted about right now. And a lot of times whenever we think about him being in the belly of this fish, we think about kind of that scene from Pinocchio where he's just sitting there singing along, and, you know, little bottles are floating by, and, he makes a little fire in there to keep warm. That is not how it was. He was being digested. He's sitting in there in the digestive juices of the fish, in the dark, alone, really being confronted by his attitude about the hardness of heart that he has. One of the things that I love about the book of Jonah is that Jonah wrote the book of Jonah. So Jonah is completely telling on himself. He's telling how he felt. He's telling how I didn't go because of that. And so God causes the fish to vomit because Jonah finally comes to a point where he says, God, I realize I'm wrong. And what I did was wrong. And I shouldn't, and I should have followed you. So he vomits him up onto the shore, and then he walks to Nineveh. It's not like he lands on the shore of Nineveh. Nineveh's not on the coast. It's landlocked. It's a city. He has to travel there. So he travels there, and he goes through the city, and he preaches. And the story and the message that he preaches is a message of gloom and doom, and that wrath is coming, and you have messed up, and you've sinned, and that God's wrath is coming. And the people of Nineveh respond like crazy. The king responds and calls for a citywide fast, nationwide fast, and they turn their hearts to the Lord, and they turn from their evil ways. Jonah goes up to the edge of the city to watch because he's expecting God's destruction. And God doesn't send it. He offers them grace and mercy because they responded to his message. And Jonah is angry and he's bitter. And he says, God, see, this exactly is why I didn't want to go. And in the middle of all of this, God causes this plant to grow that gives him shade, and he can lean up on it and rest on it. And then God sends a worm, caterpillar, to eat it, and it dies. And Jonah gets so heartbroken over it. And he cried, why did this happen? And God confronts him and says, you're so broken and upset about this plant that you did nothing to water, to take care of. You did nothing about it. But yet there is this whole nation of people who are of much greater value than plants, and you don't even care about them. And Jonah realizes that, and he turns from that. You know, in history, there are churches in the Middle East in this area that can trace their beginnings back to Jonah, to back all the way to this. He stayed, he was buried there. He stayed there. He continued to work and serve these people because he grew a love for them. So this week, at the point of this is that everyone deserves a chance to hear the gospel. And it's our job to take it and to go and to share it. So that's the big idea that we want to get that across, is that God provided a way for everyone to follow him, regardless of their color of skin, regardless of the language they speak, regardless of how much money they have. God causes changes in people's hearts. That's what we want to get across to them. This Sunday will be an incredible Sunday with the kids' choir singing. We also have several baptisms scheduled, and then we have our meal afterwards. So stay with your family. Come. Texas Baptist Men are going to be providing that for us. Stay, fellowship. It's going to be a beautiful day. I am so excited to celebrate that with you guys, and so incredibly grateful that the Lord has led us to a place with such a amazing legacy of people who impacted the city and who brought up just generations here. So I can't wait to see what happens in our, next 50 years together. So have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you soon.